5 on the clock. It's time to start our March 2023 edition of the Minnesota Woodworkers Guild monthly meeting. If you're just joining us and you're not yet on mute, please put your system on mute by clicking that icon in the lower left corner of your Zoom screen. You'll have an opportunity to interact with our presenter later by using the chat feature found down there in the lower menu bar. And one of our members, Dan Warner, will be monitoring that and passing along questions to our presenter as time goes by. My name is Ed Noy. I'm president of the Guild, and pleased to be that, supported by a really active and very productive board of directors of 9 other individuals. And at our live meetings, I always have them introduce themselves, but we dispense with that while we're here on the Zoom meeting because it just gets to be a little bit too cumbersome. If this is your first meeting with the Minnesota Woodworkers Guild, we welcome you and hope you have an opportunity to come to our live meetings. The next live meeting will actually be an event. That is our annual Northern Woods exhibition. It's coming up here in April of the 27th through the 30th. And we really encourage everyone to be there. This year, we're doing a few new things. We're trying to have some special events. Several of them are still in the planning stages, but one that we have already agreed upon is an event called Meet the Maker. Meet the Maker will be held between 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. on Saturday, the 29th. Yeah, be the 29th. And we are encouraging all the exhibitors to be present during those 2 hours so that other guild members and the general public can come by and talk with them, learn about the piece that they have there, why they made it, how they made it, what kinds of problems they encountered when they were making it, and just have a good time talking to each other about that. And just to make it a little bit nicer for our exhibitors, we'll be giving away some door prizes to the exhibitors at the end of that event. As always, you know, the Guild is supported by a lot of commercial businesses, places like Rockler and Forest Products and Woodcraft and so many others, Acme Tool. If you just go to the very bottom of our homepage on our website, you can see those supporters, and you can actually go to our supporters page. There's a link at the top of our website. Use their services, help them run their business, and while you're doing that, you get a good discount on products that you buy from them. I already mentioned the Northern Woods exhibition coming up on the 27th to the 30th. Our next big event that will be coming up won't be until October. That's going to be our what's now become our annual Woodworkers Expo. That's on October 14th, single day, Saturday, October 14th. It'll be held this year at the Canterbury Park Exhibition Center, or maybe it's an Exposition Center. At any rate, it gives us a lot more space. We're going to have a lot more vendors there. The Expo Committee has been working, well, ever since October of last year, planning this event. I'm very grateful that that committee is so dedicated and so creative, and they've come up with a lot of new participants this year, and we're excited about having a really good show. And then, of course, you know, keep your mind on the fall seminar coming up. That's back in November. Aren't any details to share with you about that yet, but we are assured that we'll have a nationally renowned woodworking expert in for 2.5 days to show us some things that we might not already know about. I guess I skipped over one of the things about the about the Northern Woods exhibition. You know, it's coming up on the 27th of April. It's only, what, about 6 weeks away. If you haven't entered, please do. Don't wait till the very last day. The April 16th is the deadline for entries. we need that time to figure out where everything is going to be placed on the floor and get all of our printed materials set up so that when visitors come, they've got a program that they can look at and figure out what they're looking at. You know, they can look up who made it and what the thing is. Anyway, all that printed material has to be prepared. So please get your projects done. Even if the finish isn't quite dry when you show up on Wednesday night, the 26th, to put the display up, we understand, and we'll manage around that. We always do. So please get your projects going, and hope we have a really good turnout this year. You know, every month at our live meetings, we have door prizes. Richard Tendig is our door prize master. He's very good at picking out good stuff and giving it away. But while we're online like this, we've been giving away gift certificates to either Rockler or Woodcraft. And Mike Johnson, who's the program committee chairman, is taking care of that for us. Last month, these 5 people got the gift cards. David Mitchell, Dean Hilbrand, Jeffrey Johnson, Mark Schott, and Sean Hart. And at the end of this meeting, we'll dump a list of everybody who's participated in a meeting for 15 minutes or more. We do set a time limit, and we'll pick 5 people at random, and you'll get a gift card in the mail or online. Depends on how Mike works that out. Okay, let's see. If anybody has an announcement they'd like to make, send us a chat right now, and we can give you an opportunity to do that. Otherwise, well, the one announcement I can make, you know, the tuition grant program just ended. The board of directors has selected 2 individuals. Those individuals have been notified, and as soon as we receive a response from them that they got their acceptance letter, then we will announce those persons on the website, and we will send notices to the folks who did not receive the grants and let them know what the situation is. We did have a good turnout this year. As I recall, we had 10 applicants, of which we could only pick 2. And I'll tell you, it was tough. All those 10 applicants were pretty much even. There are only a few things that we were able to pick out that made the winners unique. And so we made our choice that way. And then, you know, these meetings are being recorded tonight. So it'll be on YouTube as soon as we get the thing processed in a few days. Takes a little bit of time to download it and cut out all the things that just don't make any sense. Sometimes like this part of the meeting. No, we usually have the business meeting on there all the time. I don't see anything happening on the chat thing about anybody wanting to make another announcement. So I'll tell you what, rather than just sit here and blabber on and on and on, I'm going to turn this over to Dan Burks. Dan is a member of the program committee, and today's meeting was his responsibility to get set up. So Dan, go ahead and take it over.
Well, thank you, Ed. I'm going to introduce our host, Eric, in just a minute, but I'm going to blabber on for a few minutes as well. This meeting was a long time in the preparation. I first contacted Yale about at the beginning of the pandemic while we were doing Zoom meetings. And then as we resumed our in-person meetings, we put that on hold, but here we are back on Zoom. And while in contact with Yale, I learned that they have over 900 pieces of furniture in their collection. And I thought, how in the world do we whittle that down to a 90-minute presentation? And Eric, our host, told me that they're particularly proud of their period card table collection. And then I spoke with Chuck Bender at our fall seminar, and I told him about our plans, and he said, go with the period card tables. So that was that. Our meeting tonight has got a couple of extra bonus features, which are of no additional cost to you. There is a YouTube video of Eric talking with Bob Van Dyke of Connecticut Valley Woodworks, talking about their furniture study program that's available on YouTube on the Yale channel. And I believe we will also have it on our website as well. In addition to, in a week or so, Yale is updating their website, and some of the pieces that Eric will be talking about tonight will be featured on the website, and there will actually be measured drawings available that you can look at. And again, I believe we're going to post those on our website as well. You could actually make a period table from those sites, assuming from those plans, assuming that you don't sell them for profit. Eric will read you all the fine print on that, and our tech team will decide how they're going to be hosted. That's now I'm going to introduce Eric. Eric has worked at Yale University Art Gallery for 17 years, and since 2012 has been the curatorial assistant of the American Decorative Arts Department. He manages the gallery's American Furniture Study, where the majority of the gallery's collections are housed. Eric graduated from the School of Visual Arts in 1994 with a fine arts degree, and from 2001 to 2006 was also a studio assistant to the artist Saul LeWitt. Eric is also a woodworker, so that gives him some credentials. So here's Eric. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Dan. Hope everyone can hear me okay. If I'm too loud, too soft or something, just wave your hands. So thanks for inviting me to do this. It's, the pandemic kind of threw everybody for a loop. But I guess one of the things we've gotten out of this is kind of more of, I've certainly been forced to have more of a familiarity with this whole Zoom interface. And so it's been, an opportunity to be able to do things like this and really engage a whole group of craftspeople and interested people who can't just may so easily come visit us here in the New Haven area. So I'm unfortunately I can't come to you live from our American Furniture Studies Center because this being an evening program, we close it up at 5 o'clock. So I just have to sit here in my not so exciting office here. The only thing I have for relevant decoration is an original poster from an exhibition that the art gallery did back in 1982 called The Work of Many Hands. And it was sort of an exhibition really devoted to colonial federal card tables and from 1790 to 1820 specifically. And so that exhibition it's still probably still kind of, and the associated catalog that went with it is still kind of considered a touchstone as far as scholarly publication on colonial and federal card tables. It's a catalog that's been very scarce for decades, and I wanted to, what I was handed off to Dan and Mike, just want to make sure that it's available, is we finally got this catalog. Here's the catalog. The hardcovers go for several $100s on Amazon, and the soft covers are sometimes that much too. And I get a lot of people over the years saying, how can we find a copy of this catalog? But we finally got the whole thing scanned. It's kind of so I have it in a PDF, as well as a sort of supplementary chart of bandings and inlays that were, it's a chart that was used in the exhibition. And so it sort of illustrates sort of typical bandings and inlays in the post-revolutionary federal period that you see in card tables. So those two PDFs I sent off, Dan and Mike have. And so I leave it to them to see how best to that they can distribute to those in your organization that are interested. So I was happy we were finally able to get our publications department to scan that and have that as a resource for people, because it is kind of a rare, the catalog, it's kind of a rare resource now. So I guess I will share my screen here and start to kind of tell you a little bit about what goes on out here at at Yale West Campus. I will, let's see. We can all see that. So I work at the Yale University Art Gallery, and I'm a curatorial assistant to our two curators, our American Decorative Arts Department. I like I said, as Dan said in the introduction, I always feel like a little bit of a visitor in the decorative arts world, even after 10 years. I come from more, it's like sort of contemporary fine arts world, but I always had an interest in making. I fumbled my way through some furniture projects on my own. And I've always had an interest in design and furniture anyways, and antiques. And so it was a natural fit when I got the opportunity after being an art handler. I came to the art gallery as an art handler in 2006, and after sort of 6 years of doing that, to work in the American Decorative Arts Department. We in our department and at Yale, we were lucky enough to receive back in 1930 a real game-changing gift of American decorative arts, of objects from an important collector named Francis P. Garvan. Mr. Garvan graduated from Yale in 1897, and around World War I, he started really trying to collect an encyclopedic kind of collection of American decorative arts. And so we're talking about furniture, American silver, ceramics, pewter, glass, many American prints. As far as like the notion of collecting furniture and sort of subjecting it to sort of scholarly interest, the way that you would painting and sculpture, that was just sort of starting for furniture in the late 19th century and the early 20th century. The Metropolitan Museum of Art, for example, had their first show of American furniture in 1909. They had an exhibition dedicated to Duncan Fife. So that's kind of what's in the air at this time when Garvan starts collecting. And then in 1930, he gifts about 10,000 objects to Yale. And that included extensive holdings in American furniture and silver, et cetera, et cetera. And so we had established a place for the furniture. It took another 30 years to do that. And so from 1960 till about 2018, we had a basement across the street from the art gallery in downtown New Haven. We had about 10,000 square feet in this basement. We had problems with water. We had at least one water disaster in those years, but that's where a bulk of this furniture gift was stored. Obviously, we had key things on view in the galleries, and I'm going to show you a few key furniture objects we still have on view in the galleries at our mothership in downtown New Haven. But what happened in 2019 was we moved this furniture study facility out to West Campus. So I started with it. Where's the furniture, you're saying? Well, this first slide is just kind of showing you kind of the range of collection study opportunities we have out here at Yale West Campus. So we're just 5 miles west of downtown New Haven here in West Haven, Connecticut. And we are in a whole campus of buildings here that was Bayer Pharmaceutical for about 50 years. And Yale in 2008 bought the whole campus of buildings here from Bayer Pharmaceutical, lock, stock, and barrel, for various reasons. There's state-of-the-art lab facilities and other buildings here. Yale's really trying to ramp up their sciences. But this big building where I am, called the Collection Studies Center, where they used to do the pill packaging. All your Alka-Seltzer and Tylenol and pain medicine and stuff got produced and packaged up in this building. Yale took it over. They gave a piece of this pie to the art gallery for collection storage. The Peabody, our Natural History Museum, the Peabody Museum is a big stakeholder out here. We have conservation scientists and object conservation studios out here. And we also established what you're looking at, something called the Wordle Study Center. And this is sort of our home base now for collection. It's both storage and display and public and a facility for public access by appointment to objects across all our curatorial departments, not just American Decorative Arts. We have curatorial departments that cover a global culture here, Indo-Pacific department, Asian department, African department, et cetera, et cetera. And so this Wordle Study Center that you're just looking at a piece of, it's a 33,000 square foot facility. We have over 50,000 objects here across all our curatorial departments. And down the hall is the new American Furniture Study Center that we opened here in September 2019. We were, through the efforts of our last director, who was Jock Reynolds, who was here for 20 years, he managed to get us about a 18,000 square foot footprint out here in this building. And here it's on 2 levels. Here you see me talking with our chief curator, Patricia Kane. I'm really privileged to be able to kind of talk and work with and have access to Pat Kane. She is a trailblazing woman in the decorative arts and furniture scholarly field. This is her 55th year at the art gallery. Pat came to the gallery in 1968 and has been here her whole career. She got her master's at Winterthur. And got interested in furniture through Charles Montgomery, who actually followed Pat here and became our curator in 1970. And when Charles Montgomery passed away in 1978, Pat became chief curator, and she has been in that role ever since. And so we have in our new furniture study, you can see we kind of have things set up as we did in the old space. We kind of have things sort of arranged by form. And things kind of run chronologically. You kind of see in that second aisle in, for example, you're looking at high chests with sort of the dressing tables that they were often made en suite with, kind of stretching down. You're sort of seeing the front, you're sort of seeing the first half of the 18th century there, and it kind of stretches back the other way to later in the 18th century, for example. This is kind of the front of the facility. It looks a little icy here. All these pictures were taken right after we kind of got established here. It looks a little more lived in now with things going on here. Up front, we have, let me just, I'm going to go forward one. We have up front a reminder of what we had in our old basement space, which was we had a working shop. It was about 12 by 24 working shop in our old basement space, which we definitely were sure to establish when we established the furniture study downtown in 1960. So that space was established to kind of gather in everything that constituted the Garvan gift as far as the furniture. Things up to that point had been on loan to various historic houses in the East, and also out further west too. There were things on loan to Gracie Mansion in New York, for example, here, there, and everywhere. And, Mr. Garvan was kind of ahead of his time in that he really thought of this gift that he was giving of his whole American Decorative Arts collection as really a resource and something that would go on tour and be on loan to other institutions. And so the gift was gathered in the old space, which they used to kind of call a laboratory of American furniture. A lot of restoration, a lot of sort of restoration, or what we would now call conservation of objects, was done in that space. I will say, in a moment of candor, a lot of over restoration was probably done to some objects in that period when standards of standards of presentation or how far to go with restoring or conserving objects was maybe a little more aggressive than things are now. Really an important person kind of actually changing some attitudes towards conservation and sort of appreciating old surfaces and things would be James, the scholar James Kirk. I'm sorry, not James Kirk, John T. Kirk. You may be familiar with some of John Kirk's books on American furniture. He was a curator at Yale in the 60s and was active as a curator and author for decades afterwards. And Kirk was kind of an important person getting people starting to appreciate old surfaces and maybe not perfect looking surfaces on furniture and just leaving things alone and sort of not touching things. But things do need work. And so we're very lucky now to have an objects conservator on staff again, named Kathy Silverman. She's an English conservator who was brought on staff when we moved the whole furniture collection out to West Campus here. And we're lucky that we have her as a furniture person on staff now. When things do need new objects and things we get in do need a little touching up or things need to be done. This is a bench that belonged to Mr. Garvan's cabinet maker. His name was Umberto Bongioni, and it's actually signed Umberto Bongioni, or it's signed UB 1933. So Umberto was had a loft in New York City where Mr. Garvan lived primarily in the teens and 20s and beyond. And so this was Umberto's shop bench that he used. And we inherited it, I believe, when the furniture study originally opened back in 1960. Some other things that go on out here. Another really amazing resource, and we have is Edward Cook, who's in the jacket there teaching his Furniture in American Life class that he does every other year for first semester freshmen, Yale undergrads. Ned is an amazing resource. He was a curator at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts in the 1980s, and he's been on the art history faculty at Yale since the 1990s. And he's really our man in the art history department. He's the super user of the furniture study in the art history department at Yale. Ned's a real kind of material culture kind of person. He is definitely an American furniture specialist, and he's done a lot of original scholarship on Boston and Northwestern Connecticut cabinet makers in the colonial period. Ned published a new book on Boston just 2 years ago. So it's amazing. It's really an amazing opportunity just to sort of be a fly on the wall as Ned teaches his class for first semester freshmen who are still kind of have that glazed over deer in the headlights look in their first semester at Yale. We luckily are able to get them on shuttles and come out here for class once a week, and then they each have to come back and study an object with me. So this is from last fall. This is AJ sitting in a new gift we got, a rocker by Sam Malouf, made 1979. We don't usually let people sit in our chairs, but we do afford a few kind of special perks to the students in Ned's class. And here's more exciting classroom action going on up at the mezzanine of the furniture study. Students giving a presentation one day later in the semester. Ned's class. Meanwhile, our objects conservator, Kathy, who you can't really see, and her undergrad conservation intern in the maroon sweater there, they're cleaning a new gift we got. It's a piece of studio, sort of very sculptural, fun studio furniture by a furniture maker named Tommy Simpson, who's, again, same generation as Sam Malouf and people like Art Carpenter and Wendell Castle. So that's a table made by Tommy Simpson about 1965, and that we received in, and they're doing some surface consolidation, and the class is just sort of hovering around them, watching them work on that. Another aspect before we dive back into our strengths, which are, as you can tell, obviously get a sense, are colonial federal furniture. Another real exciting contemporary kind of facet of our collection here is our a pretty substantial collection of contemporary wood art and wood turning. A lot of this material really dates from, a lot of it is from the 1980s and up to the present. It's really a lot of it to the gifts of two major collectors of contemporary wood art and wood turning, who have give us two major gifts kind of over the years. And so that's a really sort of exciting, sort of more contemporary feature of the collection we have here. I guess you could say wood is sort of a common denominator as far as material. Here's another shot of the mezzanine here, and you're seeing a line of these card tables that we're going to dive into in a little bit. Here's another undergrad intern, Patrick, who was working for us last summer. He's taken little wood samples off of this really standout ladies' work table from Philadelphia that dates from about 1805. He's taken a sample of the mahogany from one of the little drawers in this lady's work table, because we're kind of doing one thing our department's working on collaboratively with the conservation scientists out here is we are trying to develop working with the scientists to develop a repeatable, reliable scientific test to distinguish the three species of mahogany, of true mahogany, that you see in 18th and 19th century furniture. The genus is Swetenia, and there's three species within the genus of Swetenia that it's mahogany, macrophylla, and humulus. And they're pretty much, you can't really distinguish them through traditional wood anatomical means. And so if we were able to end up having a eventually like a sort of laser gun, if you will, or some sort of a chemical test to basically apply to any piece of period furniture and be able to know which of those three species of Swetenia the wood is, it would really help sort of build, be able to kind of suss out and really flesh out the story of the mahogany trade in the 18th and 19th century. Among other, also obviously for modern importing and concerns with endangered species of wood and everything. It has modern applications too, if this test were able to be established. So yeah, so obviously there's too much to talk about here. So like Dan said, we figured I would try to talk about furniture here. Let's see, I started talking and just kind of keeping an eye on time here. I want to just make sure that one takeaway you all have from this talk is all the other kind of like resources and like study resources and that digital resources that you have as far as our furniture collection. What you're looking, so this collection search exists on the Art Gallery's website that you can Google on your phone right here, right now. But we are launching a brand new website that by coincidence launches on Monday. And so if you wait till Monday and you just Google Yale Art Gallery or Yale Art Collection search, anything like that, pretty much the first hit, you're going to get to the gallery's website, or you'll get right to the collection search page that you're seeing here. And so every object in our collection, and we have really, if you include everything on view, we have, probably more like about 1,100 pieces of furniture and other, obviously hundreds of other kinds of related objects. And so if you go to the collection search here and you see all the kind of categories of objects in Yale's, in the Art Gallery's collection, conveniently right up at the top there is furniture. You click on furniture and immediately you'll get like randomized at the bottom about almost 1,400 results of things categorized as furniture. And then if you wanted to say search for card tables within that, you just in the sort of Google style search bar up there, you just enter card table. And then I know from experience, having done it earlier today with this website, which they haven't released yet, you'll get about 60, you'll get like about 60 object records. We have spent a lot of time over the last couple of years trying to do very detailed object photography, the real detail of photography of objects and construction details. And we're kind of working our way through the collection here. So we, in the last 2 years, we've kind of nibbled through all our tall clocks and our card tables and mostly other smaller type tables. So like if you, starting on Monday, if you do this and you look up the card tables, all those card table records should have about each will have about 15 to 25 detailed construction photos on there. One other important sort of digital resource that our department has that is made free to the public through the Art Gallery's website is these two major comparative resources here that are the result of a lot of work over the years for our department. Pat Kane, who I mentioned, her scholarly focus for the last 20 years has really been on trying to do as complete a census of Rhode Island, of furniture attributed to colonial and federal Rhode Island from the early colonial period till about 1830. We did a major loan exhibition of Rhode Island furniture here at the gallery in the fall of 2017. It was called Art and Industry in Art and Industry in New England. So that is a major publication that's out there in the world on Rhode Island furniture. And so the result, sort of the digital repository of all this surveying of Rhode Island furniture out there in the world is the Rhode Island Furniture Archive. And there are, oh boy, good thing Pat isn't here to realize I don't know the exact number of object records in her archive. Oh, it's at least 20,000. Probably 25,000 object records of furniture she has attributed to Rhode Island, both in institutional collections and private collections. And so there are object records with detail photos. And so that's a resource. And then below that is something that I'm primarily responsible for as part of my day-to-day responsibilities, which is maintaining and developing the website devoted to another physical archive we have right here in the furniture study, and it's the business records of Israel Sack Incorporated. Israel Sack was a major dealer in American furniture in the early 20th century, which was sort of taken over by his three sons, Albert, Harold, and Robert, in the 1950s and 60s. Many of you are probably familiar with Albert Sack's Fine Points in American Furniture, or early New England, which is kind of an important sort of guidebook for connoisseurship on American furniture that he published in 1953. And so the Sacks were really the preeminent dealers in American furniture, certainly in the post-war period until they went out of business about the year 2000. And in about over 10 years ago, we were given their business records, which include at least photography of about 15,000 objects, very good professional photography of at least 15,000 objects that pass through their business over that basically 40 or 50 years. And so we have online on the Israel Sack Furniture Archive about 4,500 object records of so basically professional photography of an overall image, sometimes detail images, and sometimes extensive detail images of objects. It's an ongoing project, trying to get more of this film scanned and made into basically object records and sort of to augment what's up there. So it's a really important comparative resource for scholars, for furniture dealers, and for the public. And so that's something that I work on. And so we have particularly strong collection of card tables. A lot of these were given to us. A lot of card tables were given to us in addition to what we got as part of the Garvan gift. We were given many card tables by Ben Hewitt, who was the one of the scholars behind that Work of Many Hands exhibition, the card table exhibition back in '82. And so we have all our card tables at the furniture study, sort of. I think you got a sense there, that one picture kind of arrayed around the perimeter of the balcony of our mezzanine. There we have about 45 or 50. And so I thought I would start with this object because it has, we're lucky enough to have really good in-house professional photography of this earlier card table. And I wanted to make sure, I wanted to start with some colonial era card tables and gaming tables that we have, because I think a lot of people, because there are so many card tables that are in existence, and which reflect how many card tables were made in the period after the Revolution, really from the period 1780 to 1820, made in the more sort of more geometric neoclassic style, of which we will see in a minute. And I think, well, a lot of you, when you think colonial card table, probably what comes to your mind first are those. So card tables more in the neoclassic style of the 1780s and after. But I wanted to just sort of touch on some of some objects we have that date from the mid 18th century and in the decades leading up to the Revolution, including this really great Virginia card table in sort of what gets called the neat and plain style. This was a more recent gift, as is a gift from about 9 years ago that we got from a private individual who gifted us this table. It's really great to have. It's a really great example of Virginia style and craftsmanship from probably the 1750s or 1760s. There's a known maker named Anthony Haines who's working in Williamsburg in the 1750s and 60s, who through some scholarship, we say that this is possibly made by Anthony Haines. It is mahogany. This was after I started working in this department, and so I was tasked with helping the art handlers put this on display in our gallery. It is extraordinarily heavy. It's extraordinarily dense, clearly old growth mahogany. Could very well have been mahogany sourced from some of the incredibly large old growth mahogany that was being harvested in Jamaica and in Hispaniola, starting in particularly in the early 18th century, when mahogany becomes really a very desirable dense tropical hardwood to use in cabinet making. You really see mahogany start to become a very preferred and expensive wood of choice for high style furniture in the colonies.
We got a question in the chat, Eric.
Yeah.
To define Virginia style furniture.
Well, I can't do that writ large. I will say what this is would be an example of what is we can see from surviving Virginia area furniture, of a preference for fairly forms that do not have a lot of decorative relief carving, or veneers and inlays aren't really present. Those veneers and inlays in case furniture you saw more in the early 18th century, but they'd sort of gone out of style at this point. So it's sort of a style. You see that the legs are quite straight, and basically the surface ornamentation, it has a fairly rectilinear kind of form to it, and virtually no real surface carving or ornamentation, really. I guess that would be one way to explain it. And I will show you an image of another Boston table that kind of reflects some of this kind of style mode as well. And so, yeah, so just a quick quote that I came across, I wanted to pick up, just talking about tables in this period, in the pre-revolution period, these tables, oftentimes had multi different purposes. You had tea tables, which were fairly function specific. But things like sometimes card tables and things often were kind of made to be used for multiple purposes. There's a great excerpt taken from the letters of George Washington. Washington at some point ordered a table that he wanted to have for more than one use. Quote, to the things wrote for in my last ad, a neat mahogany card table which may serve for a dressing one. Meaning he wanted to order a neat styled mahogany card table, which he could also use as a dressing table. Those kind of tables that, as you're familiar with, that would be kind of used en suite with a high chest. So that's just sort of an anecdote about how sometimes these things like card tables were used for other purposes. Now, in this case, when you see the top flipped open, you see that actually this one was made to be even more explicitly for use in card playing, in that it does have the little counter wells inside. It has these square areas that are obviously for candlesticks to be playing in the evening in lower light, and also in these earlier what we'll call Queen Anne style or Chippendale style card tables from up to the Revolution here, mid third quarter of the 18th century. They'll often have well, we call it felt now, but in the period, and that's kind of shabby looking green felt on that now. What that originally had was what you call baize. That was sort of their equivalent of what we now are more familiar with as felt. Baize is really just woven wool that's sort of napped up to get kind of a fuzzy surface on it. So that would have had a baize applied to that sort of inset surface where the green felt is on that piece now. And again, you see the counters. There were games such as a whist was a popular card game in the period that had little bone counters. And so those little wells are for counters and that sort of thing. Moving up towards New England, this is another great, probably our preeminent sort of lavish Rococo style card table of this period, 1760s, 1770s. We attribute this to New York. And you see the really elaborate asymmetrical kind of Rococo styled carving on the knees. It has all the bells and whistles. It actually has 4 stationary legs and actually a fifth fly leg for the fly rail that flips out so that the top can open up. It has the applied sort of gadrooning on the front serpentine rail. That's definitely kind of a hallmark of New York in this period, although you do see it other places. So this is kind of one of our A-list objects that is always on view in our sort of Rococo galleries, our sort of third quarter of the 18th century sort of galleries there. Of course, made out of mahogany. And so back in the furniture study, this is kind of the beginning of our card table run here. And again, just wanting to sort of touch on before we kind of show you some of the more neoclassic style card tables from the 1780s on. This is kind of more of these Chippendale or Rococo style card tables we have. Back that first one in the corner there on the far left. You'll notice kind of looks like that Virginia one. That's we associate that first one there you see as being Boston. Again, in that more sort of plain rectilinear style, but with more dynamic sort of curved cabriole legs with pad feet. That next one there is another New York card table that looks quite similar to the one I showed you, although the looks quite similar to this one, although it only has 4 legs, and so the 4th leg is the gate leg. It has sort of more of a elaborate carving rather than the simple kind of gadrooning on the front of the very boldly serpentine fly rail in the front of that one. Next we have what you call a Pennsylvania. Next we have another card table with turrets on the front, which again, a kind of form that you're seeing in London shops and being emulated in places like Philadelphia. That card table is mahogany as well. Again, dates roughly, we'll say 1760s to 1780s. Oh yeah, here's this one flipped open. Here again, you see the little game counter wells inside. Some pretty pretty embarrassing looking felt in that. I think this was definitely probably about 50 years ago. This was probably on view in the galleries and got some damaged. And that's why it's at the furniture study. As we like to say at the furniture study, we kind of have the good, the bad, and the ugly. We have things that are ready to go on view, and we have all kinds of other objects, some in varying states of restoration and things like that. But anyways, you see sort of again the wells for the sort of wells for candlesticks or in the turrets in the front with this one, this Pennsylvania card table that has a drawer there. And so what happens is we're all probably have heard the term Chippendale style. As you may know, the style Chippendale, which refers to some of these kinds of things. Oh yeah, speaking of Chippendale, I'll just talk about this last card table right there with the straight legs. That also we associate that card table with Virginia. Supposedly when Mr. Garvan bought that card table with the straight legs that you see there in 1929, it had a family history from Yorktown, Virginia. In Thomas Chippendale's Director, which was the very influential cabinet making source book and design book that Thomas Chippendale published in London in 1753. It was called The Gentleman's Cabinet Maker and Director. You will see designs in there that align pretty closely with that straight leg card table with what's called Marlborough feet. That mode of that card table is known to have been fashionable in Philadelphia as well in the period. There it has those sort of open brackets on the front, and the whole front, sometimes on those styles, the whole rails. The rails are sort of all open fretwork. In the case of this one, it has a large open drawer, which takes up the whole front of it. But again, another sort of variation on this sort of Chippendale style as it was sort of being codified in Chippendale's Director, which of course, in those patterns and that book, we of course know that copies of Chippendale's book was sort of a source for for cabinet makers as well as clients to choose fashionable objects in this kind of period of typically bespoke furniture making, where you're going into a cabinet maker and ordering furniture. And copies of Chippendale's Director clearly made their way over to the colonies in the pre-revolution period, and were again a source for furniture shops over here. So these design books are very important. They become even increasingly important in the neoclassic period after the revolution. You're looking now at a plate from George Hepplewhite's book, the Cabinet Maker and Upholsterer's Guide, which is a book that George Hepplewhite was working on in London. He died. Hepplewhite dies in 1786, and actually his wife, we have her to thank for actually finishing his book project and getting it published in 1787, 1788 in London, and soon became an important sort of news sort of style source, sort of codifying this new resurgence and more kind of an explicit interest in neoclassic motifs. And in fact, you see actually in these sort of little spade feet on these tables, again, something kind of emulating what we saw in those sort of marble feet from Chippendale here. So some little motifs sort of carry on and other ones start. Like in this round table on the right here, you see this new kind of interest in getting away from elaborate curvilinear Rococo-inspired forms and back to sort of very simple geometry, straight lines, axial symmetry, that kind of thing, urn motifs, other kinds of classical motifs. And so this is a graphic from the card table exhibition catalog from '82. Benjamin Hewitt was obsessed with card tables. That was what he was interested in collecting. Ben Hewitt, he was an industrial psychologist by trade, and his whole scholarly sort of attack on federal card tables for that show was to really break things down to sort of their constituent decorative elements. He sort of used a mainframe, an early computer. He was actually feeding punch cards into a mainframe computer that was on campus to sort of create all these sort of systematized sort of mappings of using basically card tables that had solid attributions to makers and places, and then basically taking sort of the decorative elements in those card tables and sort of mapping where all these kinds of things like different shapes and also different aspects of the banding and inlay and like where all these things occur in documented card tables made in different areas of New England and the Mid-Atlantic and the South. And by the South, really, I mean Baltimore and Annapolis. And so, as I said, the other sort of graphic that was in the card table exhibition is another PDF that is yours to enjoy that I gave to Dan and Mike along with the card table catalog PDF, which is a graph, Ben Hewitt's graph of bandings and inlays sort of arranged by region. So basically, we have many of these kind of forms represented in our card table collection here, these different table forms.
Eric, quickly before you move, another question
Yeah.
was asked about significance of the drawer locks on the 18th century pieces, but not the Chippendale drawings.
Oh, meaning seeing drawer locks on federal era things, but not on Chippendale
Not
objects.
on the drawings, I think they were asking.
Not on the drawings.
Yeah, like no locks. Yeah, I think that's. What
you know, I would have to. I can't right off the top of my head speak to that. Indeed, as far as do lock escutcheons appear in Chippendale's drawings? That's a good question. I can't really speak to that knowledgeably off the top of my head, other than to say that you do see locks are an 18th century phenomenon. This notion of locking drawers is something that you start to see in the 18th century, even early in the 18th century, as more like lock hardware and other kinds of brass furniture hardware becomes available to order here in the colonies, to order from London. Lock escutcheons, locks and lock escutcheons are definitely available, as are any other kind of brass hardware and furniture hardware. So yeah, you're definitely seeing locks in the second and third and fourth quarters of the 18th century. But I can't really say how much that's sort of an add-on thing beyond what the plates and the design books are showing. I guess that's maybe the most I could say about that. before we kind of look at some objects, yeah, just again, now that we're in this period of the 1780, well, particularly into the 1790s, veneers and inlays and bandings make a huge comeback. This isn't a new thing. If you're familiar with case furniture from the first quarter of the 18th century, those kind of high chests on like turned legs, as they start to be made with dressing tables. Many high style examples of those have veneers on drawer fronts and have stringing and inlay on them. It was something. It was definitely fashionable in the early 18th century. It kind of goes away because then the whole rage for carved mahogany surfaces kind of comes to the forefront. But once you get back to these sort of more pared down and geometric shapes on case furniture and tables and things, that again starts to be codified in Hepplewhite's book, and also importantly in Thomas Sheraton's drawing books of the 1790s and after 1800. On these kind of more squared off or simple forms, banding and inlay is sort of the natural way to sort of add interest and add decoration back onto those things. And so you're just looking at our veneer and inlay display here. That's kind of adjacent to our card tables in the furniture study. Honestly, a lot of it was kind of, we didn't really have a huge, for all these kind of displays we have in the furniture study, we actually didn't have really a huge budget for stuff. And we kind of just had a lot of this bric-a-brac in the old furniture study, and it was kind of an opportunity to kind of weave all this stuff together, maybe source a few more things here and there, and kind of weave all this stuff together into these displays that kind of unpack different craft aspects of the furniture. I didn't want to bog down the talk with a lot of other shots of these different displays we have, but we have various other displays throughout the furniture study devoted to all kinds of different aspects of the craft of furniture making through the period there. Actually, that little piece on the shelf there that shows the stages of laying veneer down on a drawer front or a piece of wood, that little thing was actually made for us by a really cool guy, a really talented maker named Alan Breed. Al is in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Al keeps kind of a low profile. You know, I don't know if he's ever been on the cover of Fine Woodworking like Bob Van Dyke has, for example, but Al was actually featured in an early issue of Joshua Klein's Mortise and Tenon magazine, which many of you are probably familiar with, that Joshua Klein up in Brooklyn, Maine publishes. But Al did do a few, we broke our piggy bank and got Al to make a few things for our displays, and that little sort of piece at the bottom there that shows the phases of laying down veneer is one little thing, a display piece that Al Breed made for us there. And so you'd start by using a toothing plane that you see up on the panel there to score up the surface, and you lay down your glue, put down the veneer, you use that veneer hammer that you see on the upper left to press the veneer down and then clamp it down, et cetera, et cetera. Here's some other, again, little sort of pieces, just kind of, I think Al made some of the stuff we, again, just had kicking around the furniture study to kind of unpack how you're, kind of, strangely, kind of, it's kind of like, kind of like candy making almost, sort of how you're stacking up and cutting and making some of these complicated bandings and inlays. In the corner there, you see one of this sort of pattern, one of these sort of pre-made pictorial patterays. Those kinds of things were more were sort of discrete decorative objects that were often being made in London and being shipped over, and they were sort of discrete material that cabinet makers were buying. Some simpler ones were being made in the shop on site by cabinet makers, but a lot of those pictorial inlays and things were being made elsewhere, and even being made in London and being shipped over and used. This is not a card table. This is a lady's desk and secretary. This is an exciting new addition to our furniture collection at Yale. It was given to us a couple years ago. Again, to just show you what this a great example of the sort of neoclassic as it sort of reinterpreted in the federal period. Again, through these style sources like Hepplewhite and Sheraton, et cetera. So it was an exciting addition to our collection. Speaking of lock escutcheons, that's bone inlay. It's ivory inlay on the lock escutcheons, quite fancy. We didn't have any federal case furniture with a French foot, that sort of gracefully curved foot. And so that was an exciting new kind of feature to have on a piece of case furniture from this period. With so much of this furniture from this period, as you already get the sense, the whole scholarship of this stuff is who made it, where, and when. And that is because certainly in the early colonial period and through the Revolution, most furniture is rarely signed. It's even more rarely labeled. And so really all you have is the piece of furniture to go on to sort of basically piece together where this was made and when. You have the style, the manner of construction, very importantly, the woods that are used. But sometimes, if you're very lucky, you have a piece of furniture like this, which descended in the same family, and it descended with an accompanying card table, and it also descended with the original bill of sale, which is an amazing survival and a very quite uncommon and really rare thing for the original bill of sale. This is sort of a scan of a photocopy of it to stay associated with that lady's secretary. And also you will see on the second line there a card table. And so we know then that this was made for a client named John Doan in Lynn, Massachusetts, which was a substantial town north of Boston, east of Salem, and it was made in 1814. That secretary, that quite elaborate lady secretary, cost $50 in the period. The card table, which is right here, which we have in the furniture study, which was also again descended in the same family and was given to us at the same time, is on the second line there for $14 in the period. And let's see, what else did John Doan order at that time? From a known maker that someone that we were aware of named Emery Moulton. I can't tell you if there's other labeled furniture of Emery Moulton's out there, but either through signatures or other bills of sales, Moulton was a known cabinet maker in northern Massachusetts in the period here. It looks like he had a light. I should know what this is. Oh, a light stand. I think that's a candle stand for $5. This one is interesting, a marble slab table, which was probably a substantial sort of hall or a hall table, only $6. That kind of confuses me. I'd like to ask Pat Kane about that. That seems like kind of a cheap price for a marble slab table. So let's see, a set of bamboo chairs and something I can't quite make out. That may refer to a tester bedstead, some sort of a bedstead, probably might be referring to a bedstead with tester, top section for $11.50, and 2 kitchen chairs. Receive payment, Emery Moulton. And so this is the card table that we have. Again, a beautiful piece of, I don't know, you tell me. I think actually, well, they're not quite book matched, but they are, I think, two associated piece, probably cut from the same slab of mahogany, those two pieces that comprise the top there. Flip over, you see the unfinished mahogany at the top here, and the method of basically the method of the construction, how this particular maker chose to sort of articulate that particular shape through construction of the rails. The rails are just pine. You see kind of the more typical sort of economical, the way the rear rail. This is kind of what you typically see in Massachusetts, and I think generally throughout New England. You're kind of conserving wood a little bit by just simply having a spacer in between, a fairly thin piece for your rear rail, and then the stationary rail with then usually a finger joint to the fly rail in the back. Glue blocks are I don't know, maybe not old. I see some kind of witness marks there that suggest maybe the glue blocks aren't quite original on that, but definitely the original pocket holes. They're pretty neatly, in this case, pretty neatly augured in or drilled into the rails there. Some really great banding and inlay on this, that little plaque. I do not, sometimes on fancier tables, that little lighter plaque in little areas like that rectangular plaque might be satinwood. If you didn't have satinwood or want to spend them, or basically client didn't want those fancy extras, birch is sort of your a common sort of light colored sort of dynamic piece of sort of more dynamically figured birch might fit the bill for those little sort of plaque pieces there. I'm just trying to see here. Yeah, it's hard to see. I will say, just on this topic for a second, talking about satinwood. If you're ever in New England, we of course have great displays here, but be sure to go an hour north from us to historic Deerfield. Kind of a shout out to Josh Lane, who is the curator at Historic Deerfield. He also has he put together a fantastic display in his time in Historic Deerfield, devoted to, it's called Into the Woods, and it also unpacks colonial cabinet making. Historic Deerfield up in Deerfield, Mass. They have a great collection, and I was there recently, and they had really substantial pieces of all the different woods that were used in the period. And I held for the first time an actual piece of satinwood, and I was stunned at how dense it is. It has like a specific gravity of 92. It's like Purple Heart, super dense stuff, but it's light and has this very dynamic figure that changes in the light, the way mahogany does. And so and satinwood was very expensive. It was coming from, well, today it's Sri Lanka, but in what we've called Ceylon, off the coast of India in the period. And so it was a very beautiful kind of wood coming from great distance. So to use satinwood in furniture was a very expensive kind of extra. So a cool thing, I can't, of course, the time we have, can't show you everything we have as far as card tables, but just a fun, quick, another close looking exercise we'll do here with photos is to just show you 4 tables that are all nominally the same design. We have these 2 here, and these are 2 more right next to them. They all have this kind of back on that chart, that chart I showed you, a few slides back. It was number 2. It was called Square with Ovalo Corners. Was Ben Hewitt's sort of name for that sort of design. So here's we got 4 tables here that are all basically the same design. And the interesting thing about these card tables in this period, 1790 to 1820, is you really see this move towards uniformity. All these tables are almost exactly all 36 inches wide. There's give or take a little bit here. So it's interesting. You see in this period a move towards the beginning of, it's still craft production, but it's more a move towards systematizing these forms. An important part of that is the price books. Price books were an important way for the industry of cabinet makers and an important way for journeymen to basically codify the piecework that they did for these shops and to basically establish a minimum that they were going to get paid for each discrete kind of activity or type of service or type of form that they were going to make for the master, or really the owner, the entrepreneur of these shops. And again, in a shop sense, this is what's going on in this shift from the pre-revolution period into the 1790s and after 1800. Shops are getting larger. This whole notion of a shop being run by a master who is working in the shop alongside his teenage apprentices, who were sort of bound to him, and he had to sort of pay their room and board and pay for their clothes and education in order to have this cheap teenage labor in the form of these apprentices, and then also the journeymen. That sort of apprenticeship system, which was even more formalized in the guild system in London, but was also here in the colonies. That sort of goes away after the revolution. That sort of master apprentice journeyman kind of mode in these shops kind of gives away to more of a in places in the big cities like Philadelphia and Boston. You start to have people like Duncan Fife, people like Thomas Sheraton in Boston, and various people, none of the names I can think of off the top of my head in Philadelphia at the moment, but like really someone who the name on the door is someone who's, overseeing things, overseeing production of an increasingly larger shop of more and more just paid journeymen. And again, and journeymen are coming, they're going, and how you're codifying and quantifying the work that they're doing and the designs that are being executed are through these price books. And so again, it's part of this move towards a uniformity that you start to see. So we got four tables here, all in this style. Here's the first one.
Another question, Eric.
Yeah.
Quick. What the question is asked, what sort of guilds were in existence?
What sort of guild? Well, again, when we talk about guilds, it's really the guild system as it existed in England, it didn't really in the colonial period, it didn't really exist here. There just wasn't enough people to have that level of organized labor, basically. And that's what it was. It was sort of trade unions and sort of organized labor. And so, again, when you talk about the term guild, maybe I'm confusing things by using that term too much. In that the guild, the really elaborate, established, broad guild system that existed in London, it didn't really exist here. But what does happen, I guess, a way in which that kind of organization of the craft of cabinet making takes root here immediately after the revolution, and starting place like Philadelphia is through the price books. And you do start to have craft organizations and sort of organized groups of like an organized group of Philadelphia journeymen who and it's the journeyman, it's a journeyman as much as the shop owners that push for the establishment of things like the Philadelphia price book. The first Philadelphia price book, I guess, was published in 1780 something, and amazingly no copies of it survives. And then there were other copies in the 1790s and on. But I guess I just would say it's really through the price books that is the way that these cabinet making organizations, they sort of establish these, and it sort of becomes an agreed upon rules of the road that, you know, that the shops are going to sort of abide by the prices in these price books. And it's also sort of a way to codify what they charge in the price books, you know, like what to charge customers. Because, you know, again, like you're ordering furniture, you know, although shops more and more after the revolution are starting to have inventory, and that's the other thing that changes is in starting in places like Philadelphia and Boston, as you start to have actually furniture. Somebody like Duncan Fife, or for example, is going to have a furniture warehouse where they're actually making things for inventory, and it's the beginning of the wholesale trade. But still, to the extent that you're going to walk into a cabinet maker shop and say, I want a secretary, and I want it to have French feet, and I want to have this, and I want to have that. Those are all add-ons, and the price books helped codify what those extra features were going to cost, kind of like getting a moonroof or getting air conditioning for your car when you go to the dealership or something like that. So here's a table. This is Boston, and what's really here's the front. Very simple kinds of, again, this great example of this kind of neoclassic kind of very reserved kind of ornamentation in the terms of this stringing, just stringing and simple inlay. Here's the back with the fly leg. And how do we know it's from Boston? Oh, if only everything had this. We have a label on the back of this. Very exciting. Smith and Hitchings, cabinet makers, Boston. Often these labels and things will say things like offering the latest London styles, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, offering for sale at the lower something. Anyways, but the great thing is when you have a label, then you're able to sort of, if you do find surviving advertisements by these makers in the newspapers, you're able to really narrow down when this thing was made. And actually through, I think, some scholarly looking in period newspapers, I think we say 1802 to 1806. So you don't see it right in front of me here, but yeah, somewhere we have a pretty tight date range we can be confident about. Again, it's scholarship. Things are always kind of a guess. Just some details here. The dovetails of the rails attached to the back. This has some, again, not a lot of fancy banding, but it does have that kind of cross-cut kind of veneer inlay between the stringing on the table, on the top edges there. And so, yeah, so we're gonna so this is the first of four. So make note of how this cabinet maker is solving the puzzle for how am I going to make this square with ovalo corner design. So here's one way. Here's how this cabinet maker has chosen to do it. With these, he's laminated it, the rails in two sections. Sometimes you'll see three laminations here, then sort of lapped to a front piece, and then sort of a niche for the legs, et cetera, et cetera. You got a typical finger joint for the fly legs. Oh, here's just a close up of that, of how this, again, it's just pine. You see that beautiful unfinished, untouched mahogany surface there, the top underneath there. This just gives you, oh, I'm sorry, and that's that. Here's the next table. Also Boston. This one here, I just chose a shot of it flipped open here. Really great, really elaborate veneer and inlay and stringing on this. You can get a sense of the time that goes in to make this stringing or this banding really on this. I'm trying to see here if this is satin. Let's see on this one. Here's this actual satin wood in that plaque in the center. Here we're looking at number 2 of 4. You're looking at number 204. Yes, mahogany, birch, and satinwood veneers. So yeah, we call that satinwood. And again, these things have oxidized so much. I mean, the thing you got to think about, you got to use your imagination when you look at these, is just even how much more of a value range you would have had. That satinwood would have been very light, and would have, you would have seen that rippling kind of changing in the light and everything. And so, obviously everything kind of oxidizes, kind of this overall kind of amber, kind of varying amber tones here. But and even actually some of the colors in the banding here, I got a guy around here, Michael Wheeler. He's retired now. He was a guy did restoration up in Boston, and Michael is obsessed with red, white, and blue banding. And he's convinced that all this banding, all the kind of greeny colors that you see in all this banding was actually blue, and everything. And so if we had Michael Wheeler here right now, he'd be insisting that actually all that was probably red, white, intentionally red, white, and blue banding. I'm not sure. But definitely some of these kind of greens that you see in some of this banding was probably blue, was probably I guess that would be indigo dyed, indigo dyed bandings probably. So might be true. These shell pad array, again, were probably not made in the shop. They were probably, again, a discrete material that was being manufactured maybe in Boston, probably Boston, but by somebody maybe who was just specializing in doing pad array and pictorial inlays, and then the cabinet maker buys a stack of them and sticks them on the table for the commission. Here, here's just another shot of this from the side. Beautiful mahogany, very probably crotch cut mahogany veneers on this. Yeah, that's a little bubble in the veneer there. This one had a hard life when you flip it over. Definitely probably a 20th century major repair to the rails underneath this one. Definitely had a took a big hit, this table, at some point in its past. But basically you see, this is kind of an oblique shot, pardon, it should have been more of an overhead shot for what I'm trying to show here. But basically it's threading the needle the same way here. I think that's still 2 laminations, how he's doing the kind of the quarter round of the rails. So basically kind of threading the needle the same way. You see kind of 2 finger joints kind of approach. Again, just spacer, saving a little wood in the back by just having a spacer between the two, the fly rail and the inner rail there. Here's another Boston. Now here's the third of our tables here. Again, Boston. Really fine eagle inlay, an 18-star eagle inlay. As I read our catalog description of this, written by the esteemed Jerry Ward in the 80s. Jerry says these 18-star eagle inlays tend to be associated with Boston, and you see it on Boston attributed furniture. So, okay, so in the case of this eagle, this is not something being made in London. And they did. London people, even after the revolution, were making things with eagles on them, and they were happy to make a buck off Americans and ship this stuff over and sell it to us. But I guess scholarship would suggest in the case of this eagle inlay and this particular 18-star thing, the suggestion is maybe this was being made in Boston. The background of the eagle, if you look at it, it's again a hint of some color there. That could have been all blue. It's possible that was all blue, maybe indigo dyed blue, which is pretty fugitive. That may have been all blue. So again, it gives you think about some of the colors and the lights and darks that were actually going on in these things originally here. Nice little urn, again, neoclassical motifs, these little urn pad array on the sides. Now remember that urn, because we're going to see it again in a second here. And also nice little good shot of this kind of typical brass hardware. Again, this brass hardware, even after the revolution, even into the early 19th century, all that kind of brass hardwares, you got a catalog, and the catalogs that were available of London shops, London hardware catalogs, were amazingly expansive. You would be shocked at the amount of tools and brass hardware and little brass capitals for clocks, all the kind of stuff that was available in catalogs that you could order. And in about 2 weeks, it would show up on a ship coming across the Atlantic from London to places like Boston. Now look what happens. You flip it over, and this person has done something very elegant and creative. So this has curve. He has decided to do his articulate this form in a very novel way through kerf bending his corners here. And so basically the side around curving around in the front is all one piece of wood kerf bent, and then to kind of make that quarter turn then, and then it is and then after that's done, this piece of you can kind of see a sense of it. There's some burlap that's kind of put over it to kind of seal it, to kind of seal in the glue in the kerf cuts there. So this is the only card table we have like this. So it's always a fun one to show off, just to see someone else, same town, another cabinet, another shop, same town, same time period, same design, and is skinning the cat in a completely different, completely different way. Again, in an economical way, as like Pat Kane, our curator, likes to say, in New England, you see a tendency to preserve material. You see a tendency to come up with the most kind of more economical kind of way to kind of build furniture and kind of, save material a little bit here and there. And so, again, maybe a particularly New England kind of economical way to kind of articulate that form. Here's the fourth of our 4 tables, this same design, and now we have the same thing. And here's our urn inlays all over again, same exact thing. Is this made in Boston? No. This card table, through scholarship and through a big, oh yeah, I guess I didn't give you an infrared picture here, but on this, under normal light here underneath there, you can see a sense of a graphite inscription, and that's a big E. Briggs. And we believe that is Eliphalet Briggs, who was a known cabinet maker working in Keene, New Hampshire. And so we only know that, how do we know that? Oh, we know that through an elaborate, there's a documented piece of furniture out there that I think it's a chest of drawers that has Eliphalet Briggs, made in Keene, New Hampshire, 1810 or something, and it's clearly the same E. Briggs in the same hand. So basically, through associating the signature on ours to that other furniture, which has that wonderfully descriptive graphite inscription by Eliphalet Briggs, that's kind of the connection why we associate this with, we call this Eliphalet Briggs, who, based on that piece of furniture, at least, if not there, maybe there are other newspaper advertisements that survive for him in working in Keene. So we call this Keene, New Hampshire. And now look at the rails on this. These big chunky honking rails. This Eliphalet was not so concerned about preserving his pine. And so again, virtually the same design, same size. Here's another cabinet maker miles away, state away, coming up with his own way of kind of articulating this design. Also notice we were seeing little just sort of simple squared off finger joints before. He's taken the time to do a much more kind of nuanced kind of knuckle joint here, which actually tends to get is more associated actually with maybe more mid-Atlantic, maybe sometimes mid-Atlantic kind of furniture. Yeah, so that's just kind of an interesting kind of example of seeing virtually the same form articulated in probably four different shops in New England, all about the same time. I had mentioned when I was talking to Dan and Mike about this talk, I had mentioned this table, so I wanted to include it. This is another, this is an interesting case study, this table here. This is Philadelphia. We call this Philadelphia. So this is a very dynamic card table from the same period. This was a part of the Garvan gift. Mr. Garvan bought this, believing it to be real in sometime in the 20s, and it was part of the Garvan gift in 1930. It is virtually unique in having this griffin inlay on this one-off griffin inlay on the serpentine rail on the front. And this is a picture of it open. Kind of interesting for the period in this kind of federal period, and still having the inset for the bays on the gaming surface. So again, even though like I said, these tables are really multi-purpose, these tables, in this period, these card tables, they're being used for other things. We have there's all kinds of portraits in the period of someone having his portrait painted. Has his elbow on his card table in the portrait. They're used for writing at. So these are really multi-purpose tables. And actually, the thing that really drives home that fact is often these tables are made in pairs. And so right there, again, this thing about symmetry, in the period, and just the notion that you're buying these in pairs sort of suggests that it's as much about a decorating scheme for a room and everything. But again, this one still has the bays inset, so kind of suggests it was more explicitly being the client who bought or commissioned this piece wanted to use this for gaming. And so this was our prized Philadelphia, but we didn't really there's no signature or label on it. I would have to go back and look to see what kind of attribution as far as place we had on this table. I think maybe we were saying Philadelphia. But what happened was in the 1970s, Charles Montgomery, who I mentioned before, who was our curator here, he branded this thing a fake. And why did he do that? Well, it has some funky things going on with the construction when you flip it over. The legs had definitely been off. And again, some of these kind of nuances I'm going to describe, it's really impossible to show in the pictures, but it's got this, but again, these legs had these bridle joints that were clearly later. And so, and some of the inlay on the front looked like it had been moved around. And so basically, long story short, and again, this is in the world of, furniture scholarship, when something is incredibly unique, be aware, be wary. And so to him, to Montgomery, the uniqueness of this griffin inlay thing, plus the kind of head scratching things going on with the construction, said to him this was probably an English table that got monkeyed with. And again, particularly in the early and mid 20th century, it was done by unscrupulous dealers to kind of take something that put two Frankenstein together, two less rare things, and make one incredibly rare thing. Take something that was maybe had mates among English furniture and change it up and try to sell it to a client as being uniquely American or uniquely colonial, that sort of thing. So we actually had an exhibition in the 70s. Oh, actually, well, I don't have do I have my, if my camera's still showing me here, but we had an exhibition called The Eye of the Beholder: Fakes, Replicas, and Alterations in American Art. Was an exhibition we did, that Montgomery did in 1977 or so. And so that was this was one of the exhibits in this exhibition. Behold this crass forgery of a supposedly unique American card table. And so that was the fate of this thing. It kind of went into storage and got some water leaked on it, and and not the best storage we had in our warehouse up in Hamden years ago, that sort of thing. And then a scholar named Lisa Minardi, who was at Winnetou at the time, she was doing some research on a Philadelphia maker named Adam Haines, a known Philadelphia maker named Adam Haines. She called us up one day, and she was interested in the bellflower. She was interested in this bellflower inlay. And she was trying to write a paper on, she's a real Pennsylvania specialist. She is now at the, Lisa is at an institute. Oh, she is at a historic, I'm sorry, I'm spacing a name. It's outside of Philadelphia. I'm spacing on the name of the town right now. But it's outside of Philadelphia, and it's an organization that has a few historic homes, and they have a Center of Pennsylvania German Studies, and that's where Lisa is now. But basically, Lisa came to our warehouse one day. This was early on in my tenure at the department, almost 10 years ago. And so we had this table pulled down up from 50 feet in the air in our warehouse, and she spent the better part of a day looking at this table. Do I have a picture of the underside? I don't have a whole picture of the underside, but so she spent a good day looking at this table in the context of her doing this work, scholarly research on this maker named Adam Haines. And I guess there are other documented, very confidently documented Adam Haines objects that have this virtually identical bellflower inlay on it. And so she basically really looked over the object carefully, and she made a pretty good argument, like, for what went on with this object, and that basically it had some kind of catastrophic damage, and how certain inlays were moved around and everything. She basically just kind of went down the list and sort of made an argument for what had been done to this object, which obviously clearly had some major damage to it. And then it's also was very much about the bellflower inlay. And there are probably other aspects to her attribution, her reattribution of this piece that I can't quote. The whole article is, so she basically used this object in a piece of original scholarship she did in American Furniture. I don't know if you're all familiar with. I encourage you to become familiar with the anthology that it's Chipstone in Milwaukee does their American Furniture anthology every year, and that's sort of the main scholarly anthology each year for new scholarship on American furniture. And back in I don't know 15 or 16, Lisa published her article in American Furniture talking about Adam Haines' shop. And she spent a page of that article talking about our table and her argument for attributing it to Adam Haines. And so we bought her argument. You know, we went along with her. We agree with her scholarship, and so we have reattributed this to Adam Haines. And we got some conservators in Connecticut, Tad Fallon and Randy Wilkinson, are their name. They've been in business in Baltic, Connecticut for many years, and we've used them. And so we got Tad and Randy. We sent this off to Tad and Randy. We got it all fixed up, put a nice new layer of shellac, I guess, on the front of it, fix up the water damage, and now and here it is back in proper shape, with again, with its still, as far as we know, unique to the United States, this Griffin inlay, which was obviously a one-off flourish done for probably a pretty affluent client. Did it have a mate? We'll never know. It hasn't, a mate to this table hasn't popped up yet. And so that's just, that's just an anecdote of what happens over decades of the life of an of an early American object here, as different scholars approach objects and do work on things and are able to kind of make these connections and associations and arguments here. And speaking of Philadelphia, I wanted to work this table in. Speaking of unique, this table is, again, we've been talking about design books and sort of popular designs, popularized and disseminated by prints and by design books and things, and also by makers. Sometimes the journeymen, the makers themselves, have their own designs and their own knowledge of how to do things, and they travel from place to place. But this baby's, this is a one-off here. This is part of this, what is the card table on this? The number on this, 1982, I'm sorry. I think we got this from, I'm sorry, this table was not part of the Garvan gift. This was a gift from Ben Hewitt, the fellow who did all the work on our card table exhibition. So this was when this card table exhibition opened, Ben Hewitt started to give us a lot of card tables from his collection, and this was a completely one-off thing. I guess there is scholarship done on this to say that there was, the feeling is maybe this is a variant on a form that is described in the Philadelphia Price Book of 1795. It was called a circular library writing table. Hardly any circular library writing tables survive, so it probably wasn't a very popular design. And the form is is dropped from the 1811 Price Book. So another indication that maybe it wasn't a very particularly a popular table form. Now, probably a library table would not have had the bays inset on the surface. It presumably would have had a wood surface to it, maybe veneered or inlaid, to be a writing, to be a table used as a writing surface or reading or writing surface, maybe in a library. But again, this has the bays inset, so we call it a card table. If you ever see one of these at an auction or an antique store, let us know, because it's still kind of considered unique as far as a period surviving period furniture form. But some of the really very delicate kind of the turning on the legs and also kind of some of the reading on it. And kind of, it has those little subtle bead moldings along the bottom of the rail. Some of those things kind of also kind of say Philadelphia. And so basically based on all those things, we say Philadelphia for lack of any better ideas of generally where to associate this to. One of the really great things about our new facility out here is, this in our old facility, we had these horrible, they worked, but we had all these kind of fixture, 2-level fixtures that were just made out of plywood and pine and Doug fir and stuff. And so, it was kind of hard to see some of these, they were, some of these tables in these wood, fixtures and stuff. And so, now that we have kind of our new clean kind of fixtures out here at West Campus, you really kind of start to see this stuff now. And so Bob Van Dyke, who's another super user of our American Furniture Study Center here, Bob came by one day. I can't remember quite what his topic of inquiry was, but we were looking at tables. And I was kind of I kind of got interested in this thing, and we were looking at it for a minute, and so we turned it over, and this is how it's made. And he was just kind of like clutched his head like, oh my goodness. He was really blown away. He was like, this is not how I would have guessed how this thing was made. Again, it's a one-off. So this was how, but what also interests me about this table is just, again, in this period, it just makes sense. Like, okay, so this wasn't a known form, maybe necessarily in one of the design books. Maybe it was only described in a price book, but again, in this kind of period of interest in very simple geometry, it makes perfect sense to me. It's one of these sort of, well, of course somebody would have made a perfectly round table with drawers in it, with turned legs in this period. It's just sort of one of these sort of like, given what was fashionable at the time, of course somebody would have said, let's make a round card table. And this was how they decided to sort of solve the problem of how to put together a round card table. Possibly still unique, a unique survivor out there. Since we can only follow so many sort of topics of inquiry here, we'll kind of stick with Philadelphia for a moment. And here's another more recent gift we've been lucky enough to receive just in a couple of years from a donor. This is a great example of kind of where this neoclassic period goes now. This is kind of considered more a late neoclassic or sort of empire period. We call it Philadelphia. We date this about roughly broadly say first quarter of the 19th century. I think our curators hone in more about 1815 to 1825 for a date for this. And that is kind of based on a tenuous attribution we have of this table to a known maker named Lawrence Sink, who was a known Philadelphia maker. And Sink was born 1765. He died 1828. There is a labeled, not a card table, but another table. There's another Pembroke table out there with a Lawrence Sink label. And it has some stylistic similarities. It has this kind of central curve, this sort of central area of the rails is sort of this central projected area that has a slight curve in it with the real broadly rounding corners. And also kind of aspects of the carving of the acanthus sleeves on the leer form of the column. Again, this sort of very common form, obviously coming out of antiquity, out of classical motif. You see in classical architecture. You're seeing that form in things like the wall paintings being discovered at the archaeological sites at Herculaneum and Pompeii. Again, those excavations were going on in the mid-18th century, and the discoveries on those wall paintings and those sites at Herculaneum and Pompeii were being popularized, et cetera, et cetera. That's how some of these classical motifs are kind of being popularized. But anyways, through the basic shape of the table, aspects of the carving, is very similar to this labeled Lawrence Sink table. So again, is that a slam dunk attribution? No, it's a question mark. So that's again, that's part of the game with trying to sort of talk about these objects and kind of locate them. Here's other aspects of the carving. I don't know if this acanthus leaf on the knees, I don't know if this carving necessarily is what they're talking about, associates with that other labeled Lawrence sink table out there. I don't know. I haven't seen it. We, you know, on fancy tables, of course, that we saw earlier in the Rococo period, you had your carved claw and ball feet. Well, here's a much more economical kind of way to get that same effect. If you can, coming from various foundries in London, or these sort of paw-shaped caster feet. Our Ned Cook, who's the fellow in our art history department here, the furniture scholar that I mentioned earlier. Ned Cook loves to talk about casters. He loves to pose this question to people about these little rolling wheels, these casters you see on furniture in the period. Why do you start to see casters? I'll put this question to somebody. Why now, in this period, after 1800, we'll say, or starting the 1790s, why now do you start to see wheels on furniture so you can roll it around the room? You're still chasing daylight around the room. This is really before gaslight. This is definitely before gaslight. Just like in the 18th century, you're relying on daylight coming into the room. And so you as you were for centuries and centuries before, and you're still in this period here, the beginning of the 19th century, you're still relying on daylight around the room. And all of a sudden now, somebody comes up with the idea of putting little wheels on furniture, these casters. Why now? I'll put that question. Does anybody have an answer to that question? Why do casters show up on furniture now? Anybody? Bueller?
Better floor.
What's that?
Better floors.
Better floors. That you're onto it. Better floors. Carpets and rugs. So it's an indication that carpeting and rugs are starting to become more available to people, even more middle class people. You start to see more carpeting and rugs in parlors and interiors. And now, when you have carpets and rugs, these little brass wheels are a very graceful way to roll your card table. For women to roll their work table that they're working at, to roll it around the room to kind of chase the daylight, or also move things out of the way depending on what's going on in the room. Like when you had wood floors, you know, these little brass wheels, you know, they're going to run on the grit and everything. And, you know what it's like running these little glasses on wood floors. It's kind of loud and not very graceful. But once you have carpeting, carpets and rugs start to be factored, well, then these little delicate brass wheels become a very graceful way to move furniture around. This is the bottom of the piece. I am not sure if these brackets are original or not. As I was putting this, I was adding adding these slides in today. Pat Kane was out here, and I went down to ask her her opinion on this, and she'd already left. Obviously, you can't really see it now, but definitely the legs have these big dovetail connections to the sort of the base here that are kind of obscured by these brackets. Given how kind of irregularly cut these brackets are, I'm going to say maybe they're later. But so I got to go back and check on this one, whether these brackets might have been original. Now, like on tea tables, like I could show you all, go to the furniture study right now and show you candle stands and tea tables where you have, again, the 3 legs have big dovetail attachments into the base, but then they also have this iron thing called a spider web. and in earlier ones, they're like they're hammered wrought iron. And those spider webs, those are original. Those were often very commonly an original sort of bracing or extra augmentation to make sure your legs stay on there. But these things, I don't know, they look very later 19th century to me. I'm not sure if they're original or not. Here's the top of this table. Really beautiful, bold, dynamic, crotch cut, mahogany crotch veneer in this very dynamic pattern. And this is just showing you how these tables worked. We kind of got the picture on how your typical 4-leg gate leg table card table work, but now with these pedestal type card tables, the whole tabletop swings on a pivot at 90, and then it kind of it flips open. And this is just a detail to show you the construction of how the rails were made. Obviously, since these things were opened up and these rails now, unlike on the other card tables, are actually being seen. Obviously, the shop is taking the extra time to kind of nicely round off those rails. And even these probably niches were probably people probably stored stuff in there too. But I think just seeing this kind of laminated construction for the corner there, actually I thought was a pretty groovy detail to throw in there just to show you how that's made. And that's it in action. Again, you had veneers here, and that's the solid, and that's the solid surface, the mahogany boards you're seeing. That's sort of the game surface here. Well, I'm on my last slide. So I wanted to just kind of kind of top it off with showing you a beautiful standout example of one of these late kind of empire tables. This butte is part of the Garvan gift. Has a very low Garvan number. It's 1930-2002. So it was one of the first things that was on the top of the list of objects that Mr. Garvan gave to Yale in 1930. Again, this is one of our A-list objects. This is not in the furniture study. This is on view as it always will be. It's obviously a highly unique, highly sculptural card table. It has an identical mate with the eagle facing in the opposite direction. That is part of, I think it was part of the Maxim Korolic collection that went to the Boston MFA. I assume the one that Boston is always on view there. So imagine the client who this is. I believe that this pair of tables is completely unique. Although the saber leg mode of the legs that this eagle is sitting on is definitely very common kind of variation of these legs that you see on these pedestal card tables kind of in this period here. We call this New York. Actually, this is attributed to New York. It's just mahogany veneers, eastern white pine structure under there. If I could have taken some pictures, this is one we haven't been able to do any construction photography yet because it's always on view in the galleries. But some Monday, when we rally our forces together, we'll have to go in there and flip it over on a blanket and do some good construction and detail photographs for the good of the public to have up on our website. But yeah, you can imagine, obviously this was an affluent client who would have commissioned this kind of unique pair of tables, and you can imagine the interior that probably that pair of tables with eagles looking at each other was made for in the period. And that's kind of what I have. I don't know if I haven't been getting peppered with a lot of questions. So by all means, if anybody was holding back, fire away. Whoops. Whoops. Anybody?
Well, we don't seem to be getting any questions, Eric. So I want to thank you for your
Okay.
time and this great presentation. Really appreciate you offering those PDFs and those other documents that you're allowing us to share with the rest of our members. So
Sure. Yeah, no, my pleasure. Like I said, it's great to finally have those, because it is such a hard to find, expensive book out there. So yeah, share away. And yeah, and then there's the chart. The chart that goes with it is it's like I said, it's a long chart that basically it sort of graphs all the kind of different patterns of banding and inlay that you see on these card tables in the period, and it kind of graphs them by where they appear in different areas, basically all along the eastern seaboard there. But you need the kind of book you need the catalog to kind of decode it a little bit there. So they're kind of those two PDFs are kind of a pair.
okay, so we did get a question. Someone's asking about, can you share any information about the extensive use of wood screws?
About wood screws. Yeah, you do. Wood screws are definitely a thing in the period. I don't know if maybe many of you know the little trick for when you're looking at something and trying to see if it's an original or period wood screw. You always kind of look at the slot in the screw head to see how perfectly on center or off center it is, because screws in the period here, the slots were being hand filed, and they're often very off center on the head and stuff. And so yeah, screws were being made. I'm not as an expert on screw making as I should be. We have a if I could snap my finger, I'd show it to you. We have a whole display of the development of screws. It's one of the display panels we have in the furniture study. That one was one my colleague Alexandra Ward, who was working with us when we were doing the whole furniture study move. That was on her displays, and I got to go back and spend a little more time with it. But basically, broad strokes. Yeah, I mean, certainly after the revolution, you had shops that were, had these kind of mechanisms that were cutting the threads, for screws. And so screws were certainly after 1800, screws were, unlike some of that fancy brass hardware and stuff, screws were things that were being made domestically for sure. And starting to be made again more and more kind of getting closer to what we would think of as industrial manufacturing techniques and everything, as opposed to obviously in the colonial days of having a blacksmith who's doing hand wrought nails and fasteners all day and things. But yeah, you definitely. I'm just trying to think if I can think of anything in our collection that is pre-revolutionary that has period screws in it. I can't. Nothing pops into my head, but I would say definitely they start to appear all over objects that we would date from the 1790s. American objects we would date from the 1790s onward, for sure.
That's interesting. What can you say about ball and claw feet? I noticed in some of those pictures there were some examples. How have you guys specifically documented the different varieties that you guys have and where they came from? And
oh yeah, I mean that's a tried and true. Yep, it's a tried and true area of area of scholarship with furniture. You know, yeah, like, I guess I can't. Oh, look at it. Can I go back? Go back to, let's see, where did they show up here? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and then if you go
Um,
to the one below that, there's, I think you can't really tell, but you can kind of make out that there's a couple of different varieties.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You know, there's a lot of sort of guidelines have been observations have been made about ball and claw feet, and yeah, there's amazing there's an extraordinary consistency in the colonial period in certain regions. Boston feet have these kind of skinny knobby talons, and the inside talons are kind of raked back. That's classic Boston. The New York feet tend to be kind of cubic. They tend to be kind of very squared off looking. And they're more like Philadelphia feet. These have pretty complete balls. I'm trying to think. I think Philadelphia feet tend to have a more squashed ball, I think. But these balls look pretty full. Even things like on this New York table, the way the inside talon is really straight and simple, that's kind of a tell too. And I think I can't remember if that's considered a specific sort of New York shop hallmark, the way the inside talon is very straight. For example, of course, you're probably very familiar with the classic thing with Newport ball and claw feet. They have the very realistically carved talons that are undercut, and they come off, and they come all the way off of the ball. Very tall balls. That's the classic, Townsend Goddard shop sort of expression of that coming out of Newport, and also Provenance to a degree and stuff. Yeah, you can go on and on. In this picture here, the Connecticut table, so that's the from the left, it's the fourth one in. Those ball and claw feet look kind of weird. And if they look kind of weird, well, that's Connecticut for you. All kinds of anecdotes about Connecticut River Valley furniture in the period being a little off, a little left the center, a little odd in its expression. Again, it's you're out in the country, you're out in the Connecticut River Valley, far away from places like Boston. You don't have the rigid sort of established way that, well, this is the way we do things in the shop. You just kind of have, sometimes you get craftsmen are like, oh, I've seen this thing, or so-and-so in town has this table he got in Boston. I saw it once. I got a pretty good idea of how to do, that sort of thing. So, you see some fantastic examples, very interesting examples of in more rural objects, how these kind of big city motifs gonna get reinterpreted, or maybe a little confused, or expressed in more idiosyncratic ways, that kind of thing. Since we were talking about the one thing, when people talk about claw and ball feet, the one little thing you always want to throw in there is, since we were talking about Chippendale, and since we're talking about design books, is, when you say to somebody, American Chippendale furniture, probably the first thing they'll say right back to you is, oh, claw and ball feet. But the interesting thing is, if you flip through every page of Thomas Chippendale's The Gentleman's Cabinet Maker and Director from 1753, if you flip through any of the three printings of Chippendale's book in the 1750s, to despite all the classic Chippendale styles that you'll see codified in that book, the Gothic, the Chinese, the modern, which is actually like what we call the Rococo. Guess what you're never going to find in Chippendale's book? A claw and ball foot.
Wow.
And why is that? Well, because in London, the claw and ball foot was already a little passé by the 1750s. So the basic thinking is that like the claw and ball foot is a motif. It's Chinese. It's the Chinese motif. It's the dragon clutching the pearl, the pearl of wisdom. And so, you know, it was everything. It was all, you know, so this whole rage for the Chinese style was raging in London in the second quarter and into the mid 18th century. But I don't know, Chippendale deemed it already a little passé when he did his book of designs, and yet by the time Chippendale's book and that kind of notion of high style got over here, it came over with the stylish notion of the ball and claw foot. It's just this weird thing of little fashions arriving over here in the colonies at different speeds. And so they all kind of are, the ball and claw foot and Chippendale's book, they all, and certain ideas all kind of arrived at the same time, and it kind of got codified over here at that time in that way and everything, even, you know, so it's just this kind of funny story of how styles and ideas kind of travel at different speeds.
Yeah. So one final question, what do you look for in new pieces to add to your collection, and do you have a wish list?
So what we look for is documentation. So that's why I kind of definitely I made a point of things like this. You know, we have to be quite selective at this point. You know, we have great riches thanks to the Garvan gift in our furniture holdings, you know, particularly from the period, you know, 1750, 1830, which is obviously you know, the heart of our collection. So we have to be very selective about what we take in, and so yeah, so definitely things like that card table possibly attributed to Lawrence Sink, things like the Emery Moulton lady secretary and card table, having something like a bill of sale with it, you know, or a really great family history, you know, something that has a really great either oral or written family history, and which this thing also had. You know, so this gift had it all. It had a great family history. It stayed in the same family for over a century, and it had the bill of sale, or like a label on something, or a really good signature. Those are the kind of things, and of course having other aspects of something that we don't really have covered in our collection yet. But basically, you know, being able to confidently attribute a known maker, and therefore a place and a time. That's kind of what we're looking for. I didn't include it because we were talking about card tables, but another gift we got recently was of a quite unusual a desk and bookcase made in Charlestown, Mass, in Boston, at about 1780, and it actually has a label in a drawer, Benjamin Frothingham's label in the drawer, and that's a quite uncommon thing. And so that was another great gift that we've been given in the last couple of years. We really have virtually no labeled case furniture from that period. So yeah, that's sort of what we're looking for. I'm sorry, there was a second half of that question though. What are we looking for in gifts?
What's on your wish list? What would you like to add that you guys don't have?
Well, two things we don't have. One thing we just were lent. We just received a long-term loan last week, and it hasn't gone on view yet, and so we brought it to the furniture study out here. Two things is for all the amazing collecting that that Mr. Garvan did in the period, and other acquisitions that we've had the opportunity to get over the years. We do not have either a piece of Bombay case furniture, a piece of swell front Boston or New England case furniture, and we do not have a piece of Japan case 18th century Japan case furniture. As far as a Bombay swell front furniture, we were just from the the Dietrich Americana Foundation just lent us a circa 1760. Oh no, I'm sorry, it's Salem. It's attributed to Nathaniel Gould of Salem. 1760s, 1770s swell front, fall front desk. So we were just lent that. So that's a really great thing to at least have on long-term loan here, and it'll probably go on view at some point. But we still do not have a piece of Japan furniture. For people who don't know what Japanning is, that's, again, we were talking about the Chinese style. Japan furniture was all the rage in the early 18th century, and it's basically case furniture that had very elaborate figures, scenes, and animal scenes, and landscape scenes in the Chinese style, painted elaborately on the front and sides of case furniture. It was not lacquer; it was just done in paint and gesso and gilding, and so it was very unstable. And so Japan case furniture is rare to start with, and it's often in very bad condition. I discovered the historic Deerfield up the way. They've got a beautiful Boston piece of Japan high chest. So we do not have that would be at the top of our list, finding a really great piece of early mid 18th century Japan case furniture would definitely be a great thing.
Yeah. All right, great. So yeah, it doesn't look like there's any other questions. So again, appreciate your time and sharing all your knowledge on all this. Appreciate everybody joining us.
Sure, my pleasure.
Yeah.
People can come out to Yale and at least see the permanent collection, if not what's in your study.
Oh, well, you can come here too. Yeah, sorry, I didn't really, I guess maybe sadly you guys are so far away, but if you do get, when you do get here, yeah, so out here at the furniture study, we're open 9 to 5 during the week. Hence, you know, why I couldn't be in the furniture study tonight, doing this. But yeah, and of course our galleries are the art museum itself downtown is of course open late on Thursday and open on the weekends. But yeah, if you ever think you're going to be out here, yeah, we're open by appointment out here. Just shoot me an email and yeah, you can make an appointment to come visit.
Great.
A whole bunch of other furniture museums out there as well.
Yeah. And yeah, and please spread my email around. Again, the easy one to remember is the furniture study mailbox. It's uag.furniturestudy@yale.edu. And another thing, another resource thing I can distribute if you're interested and you email me is we also have a Hardin company, a Hardin furniture company in the 1980s were licensed to do reproductions of about a dozen objects from the Mabel Brady Garvan collection. And so we have all of Hardin's measured drawings for things, including the big hit out of that group that I get 10 times more requests for, more than any of the other pieces of furniture, is our Townsend bureau table. our John Townsend Bureau table, which is, Newport 1760s or 70s there. But I get many requests for the measured drawings for our Townsend Bureau table. And I emailed Dan just like the sort of inventory list of what drawings we have and what objects they are. But I mean, you can just email me, and if you're interested, I'll send you that list. And if there's any that you're interested in, we just have a simple release form, and you just sign it. It just says, I'm not going to make any of these for production or profit. Just sign it and then send it back to me, and then I'll send you the measured drawings of whatever you're interested in. So, because we have all the original drawings from Hardin that were done, and we had them all scanned. So, yeah.
All right, sounds good.
But yeah, Phil, ever have questions? I get, we are offered things sometimes. If you ever have anything that you wanted to find out more about, or something you might be interested in, an object you might be interested in offering us, or simply finding out more about, feel free to reach out and send a couple photos, and happy to give people feedback on things. So
Browse through my collection and see if there's anything that you're in.
Yeah. Great. Well, all right. Well, that's going to do it for tonight's show. So thank you everyone for joining. And Eric, again, thank you. And hope to see you all at the
pleasure.
Northern Wood Show. So take care, everyone.
Okay.
Night.
Bye, guys.